It was a busy Saturday afternoon in the middle of a crowded shopping district. People were walking between stores, families were sitting outside cafes, and the streets were filled with the ordinary noise of a weekend. Among the crowd was Jason Statham's adult daughter, portrayed here as part of a fictionalized story. She had stopped near a small cafe and was checking her phone when a man suddenly stepped into her path. His name was Derek. He had already been arguing with another customer nearby, but when he noticed her, his attention shifted. "Hey," Derek said. She looked up. "Can I help you?" Derek smirked. "You could start by watching where you're going." She glanced around. "I wasn't bothering you." Instead of walking away, Derek moved closer. She immediately stepped back. "Please leave me alone." Several people nearby noticed the exchange, but nobody understood how quickly it would escalate. Derek laughed. "Why are you acting scared?" "I'm not scared. I just don't want an argument." She turned to walk away. Derek followed. She stopped and looked back. "I said leave me alone." This time, a few people began paying closer attention. A nearby shop employee stepped outside. "Everything okay?" She nodded quickly. "I'm fine. I just want to leave." Derek shook his head. "She started talking to me." The employee looked confused. "That doesn't matter. Just let her go." Derek ignored him. When she tried to move past him again, Derek suddenly grabbed her. The situation changed instantly. People nearby gasped as he briefly put her in a dangerous chokehold. She struggled to get free while several bystanders shouted for him to let her go. "Let her go. Call security." Someone call the police. The employee immediately reached for the phone. Derek finally released her and stepped backward. She moved away quickly, shaken but conscious. A woman nearby stayed beside her. "Are you okay?" She nodded, trying to catch her breath. "I think so." Across the street, someone had already contacted security. Derek looked around at the crowd. For the first time, he realized almost everyone had witnessed what happened. But he still tried to act confident. "You people don't know what happened." The woman standing beside Jason's daughter pointed toward him. "We saw everything." Derek's expression hardened. Meanwhile, a vehicle pulled up near the entrance. A man stepped out. He had arrived after receiving an urgent call. Jason Statham, portrayed in this fictionalized story, looked across the crowd and immediately noticed his daughter standing with several concerned people. His expression changed. He didn't run toward Derek. He didn't shout. He simply walked forward with a calm, focused determination. As Jason approached, the crowd began moving aside. Derek looked at him. He had no idea who was walking toward him. And he certainly had no idea that the next few minutes would change everything. Jason moved through the crowd without saying a word. His eyes went directly to his daughter. She was standing beside a woman who had stayed with her after the confrontation. Jason stopped in front of her. "Are you okay?" She nodded, although she was still shaken. "I'm okay." Jason looked at her carefully. "Are you sure?" She took a breath. "Yes." Only after making sure she was safe did Jason turn his attention toward the man responsible. Derek was standing several feet away. A security guard had already arrived and was keeping some distance between them. Derek looked at Jason with a defensive expression. "What are you looking at?" Jason didn't answer immediately. He simply looked at him. Then he said calmly, "Step away from her." Derek laughed. "You think you can tell me what to do?" Jason's voice remained controlled. "She already asked you to leave her alone." Derek glanced toward the crowd. "She was arguing with me." A woman nearby immediately shook her head. "No, she wasn't." Another witness added. "She tried to walk away twice." Derek looked irritated. "You people don't know anything." The security guard stepped forward. "Sir, I need you to stay where you are." Derek ignored him and took one step toward Jason. Jason didn't move. He simply said, "Don't make this worse." The words were quiet, but the entire crowd heard them. Derek smirked. "You threatening me?" "No." Jason paused. "I'm telling you to stop." The security guard moved between them. "That's enough. Everyone needs to stay calm." Jason immediately stepped back. His daughter looked at him. "Dad." He turned toward her. "Go sit somewhere safe." "I don't want to leave you." "You're not leaving me." You're taking care of yourself. She nodded. A woman from the nearby cafe offered to stay with her. Jason thanked her. Then he turned back toward security. I don't want a confrontation. The guard nodded. That's good. Jason continued. I just want what happened documented properly. Derek scoffed. You're acting like I'm some kind of criminal. Jason looked at him. I'm not deciding what you are. He pointed toward the witnesses. They saw what happened. Let them explain it. That answer made Derek uncomfortable. He had expected anger. He had expected Jason to rush at him. Instead, Jason was allowing the facts to speak for themselves. A second security officer arrived, followed shortly afterward by authorities. The officers separated everyone and began asking questions. One officer approached Jason's daughter. Can you tell me what happened? She nodded. She explained that Derek approached her, followed her when she tried to leave, and then grabbed her. She spoke calmly, without exaggerating anything. The officer took notes. Then he spoke with the witnesses. One after another, their accounts matched. Derek had started the confrontation. She had tried to walk away. He had followed her. And he had physically grabbed her. Derek's confident expression began disappearing. One of his friends, who had been standing nearby, quietly stepped toward him. Derek, just stop. Derek looked at him. Stay out of it. His friend shook his head. No. You need to stop making this worse. Derek stared at him. You're taking their side? I'm telling you the truth. The officer heard the exchange. That's exactly what we need. The truth. Jason remained silent. He wasn't trying to control the investigation. He wasn't demanding special treatment. He wasn't using his reputation to intimidate anyone. He simply stood beside his daughter. After several minutes, the officer approached him. Sir, we'll need your statement as well. Jason nodded. Of course. The officer looked toward Derek. You'll need to remain here while we finish documenting the incident. Derek sighed. This is ridiculous. Jason finally looked at him. No. Derek turned. Jason continued calmly. What's ridiculous is that she asked you to leave her alone and you didn't. Derek had no answer. The crowd became quiet again. Jason wasn't yelling. He wasn't threatening him. He was simply stating the truth. And for the first time since the confrontation began, Derek seemed to understand that the man standing in front of him wasn't interested in proving who was tougher. He was interested in protecting his daughter and letting the consequences fall where they belonged. Derek looked around at the witnesses, then at the security officers, then at Jason. His confidence was disappearing. But the biggest surprise was still waiting. Because before the authorities finished reviewing the incident, they would discover that this wasn't the first time Derek had been accused of intimidating someone in public. The atmosphere around the shopping district had completely changed. What had started as a brief confrontation had now become an official investigation. Security officers were speaking with witnesses, the authorities were documenting statements, and several people who had watched the incident were still standing nearby. Derek, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly frustrated. He kept looking around as if he expected someone to defend him, but nobody did. One officer approached him. Can you explain your side of what happened? Derek crossed his arms. I was talking to her. That's all. The officer looked at his notes. She says you followed her after she asked you to leave her alone. Derek shook his head. She was being disrespectful. A nearby witness immediately spoke up. That isn't true. The officer turned toward him. What did you see? I saw her trying to walk away. Another witness nodded. So did I. Derek looked irritated. You people are making this sound worse than it was. The security guard replied. You're not helping yourself by arguing with everyone. Derek fell silent. A few feet away, Jason remained beside his daughter. He wasn't trying to draw attention to himself. He wasn't speaking to reporters. He wasn't demanding that anyone treat him differently. His only concern was making sure his daughter was safe. She looked at him. I'm sorry. Jason immediately shook his head. Don't apologize. I didn't want this to happen. You didn't cause it. She nodded. Jason continued. You did the right thing by trying to walk away. Those words seemed to calm her. Meanwhile, an officer approached Jason. Sir, I need your statement. Jason nodded. Okay, The officer asked him what he had seen when he arrived. Jason answered honestly. I wasn't here when it started. I arrived after receiving a call. When I got here, she was already separated from him. The officer nodded. So, you didn't personally witness the initial confrontation?
No.
That detail was important. Jason wasn't pretending to know something he hadn't seen. He continued, I can only tell you what I saw after I arrived. The officer appreciated the straightforward answer. What did you do? I checked that my daughter was okay. Then I asked him to stay away from her. Did you threaten him?
No.
Jason paused. I told him not to make the situation worse. The officer wrote that down. Across the area, Derek overheard the conversation. He looked surprised. He had expected Jason to exaggerate the story. Instead, Jason was being completely factual. One of Derek's friends quietly approached the officers. I need to tell you something. The officer turned. What? There have been other incidents. Derek immediately looked over. Don't. His friend continued anyway. Derek has gotten into arguments with people before. Usually he intimidates them until they leave. The officer's expression became serious. Do you have specific examples? The friend nodded. There was an argument at a parking lot a few months ago. Another one at a convenience store. Derek shook his head. That has nothing to do with this. The officer replied, maybe it doesn't, but we'll document what you're telling us. Derek became visibly nervous. Jason didn't react. He wasn't interested in seeing Derek punished beyond what was appropriate. He simply wanted the truth established. One of the witnesses looked toward Jason. Are you going to press charges? Jason glanced at his daughter before answering. That's for the proper authorities to determine. The witness seemed surprised. You're not angry? Jason looked at him. Of course I'm angry. He paused. But anger doesn't decide what happens next. That sentence made several people quiet. Jason continued. My daughter was frightened. That's what matters to me. Derek heard him. For the first time, his expression changed from anger to discomfort. He had expected Jason to treat him like an enemy. Instead, Jason was treating the entire situation as a matter of responsibility. The authorities finished gathering the initial statements. One officer approached Derek. You need to remain available while we complete our review. Derek nodded reluctantly. Then he looked toward Jason. Why are you acting like this? Jason looked at him. Like what? Like you're not angry. Jason answered quietly. I am angry. Derek seemed confused. Then why aren't you doing anything? Jason looked toward his daughter. Because protecting someone doesn't require losing control. Derek had no response. The officers continued their investigation. Witnesses began leaving. Security returned to their normal duties. Jason stayed beside his daughter until she was ready to go. And as Derek watched them leave, he finally realized something uncomfortable. Jason hadn't needed to threaten him. He hadn't needed to fight him. He hadn't needed to use his reputation. The truth was enough. And now Derek was beginning to understand that the consequences of his actions might reach much further than he had ever imagined. Derek thought the hardest part of the situation was over. He was wrong. As the authorities continued reviewing the incident, more information began coming to light. Several witnesses had provided statements, and security had access to footage from cameras covering the shopping area. The footage showed something Derek had hoped nobody would notice. Jason's daughter had tried to walk away more than once. Derek had followed her, and when she clearly told him to leave her alone, he continued the confrontation. The evidence didn't tell a story of confusion. It showed a clear pattern of escalating behavior. Derek sat in a nearby office while the authorities reviewed everything. He looked increasingly uncomfortable. One officer placed a document on the table. We've spoken with multiple witnesses. Derek sighed. So, their accounts are consistent. Derek crossed his arms. I already told you what happened. The officer nodded. And we've compared that statement with the available footage. Derek became silent. The officer continued. Your version doesn't match what we have. Derek looked away. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, Derek muttered. I didn't mean for it to go that far. The officer looked at him. But it did. Derek didn't answer. Meanwhile, outside the office, Jason remained with his daughter. She was calmer now. Jason handed her a bottle of water. Take your time. She nodded. I'm okay. I know. She looked at him. You didn't have to come. Jason smiled slightly. Of course I did. She smiled. Then her expression became serious. I was scared. Jason nodded. That's understandable. But when you arrived,
She paused.
I felt safe. Jason looked at her. That's all I wanted. He wasn't interested in appearing heroic. He wasn't interested in showing anyone what he could do. He simply wanted his daughter to know that she wasn't alone. Inside the office, Derek's frustration was growing. He had expected Jason to confront him. He had expected shouting, maybe even some dramatic revenge. Instead, Jason had stayed calm and allowed the authorities to handle everything. That somehow made Derek feel even more uncomfortable. Later, Derek was escorted outside. He saw Jason standing with his daughter. Their eyes met. Derek hesitated. Then he walked toward them. Jason noticed him, but didn't move. Derek stopped several feet away. I want to say something. Jason waited. Derek looked at Jason's daughter. I'm sorry. She didn't respond immediately. Derek continued. I shouldn't have followed you. She remained quiet. I shouldn't have touched you. Jason's expression remained serious. Derek looked at him. And I shouldn't have kept going when you told me to stop. Jason nodded. That is the truth. Derek seemed surprised. You're not going to say anything else? Jason replied. What do you want me to say? Derek looked down. I don't know. Jason's voice remained calm. An apology doesn't erase what happened. I know, but taking responsibility matters. Derek nodded. I understand. One of Derek's friends approached from behind. Derek, we need to go. Derek looked at him. You coming with me? His friend hesitated. Yeah. But the answer wasn't confident. Derek noticed. What's wrong? His friend sighed. I don't want to be involved in this anymore. Derek stared at him. You're leaving me?
No.
His friend paused. I'm just not going to lie for you. Another friend stepped forward. Neither am I. Derek looked between them. For years, he had believed these people were loyal because they supported everything he did. Now, he understood something different. They weren't loyal. They were tired. Tired of defending him. Tired of watching him create problems. Tired of being associated with his behavior. Derek lowered his eyes. Jason noticed the change, but he didn't say anything. The next morning, Derek returned to the area. He found Jason standing outside a cafe. Why are you here? Derek asked. Jason replied, getting coffee. Derek smiled awkwardly. Right. There was a long silence. Then Derek said, I keep thinking about something. What? You had every reason to be angry. Jason nodded. I was. Then why didn't you come after me? Jason looked at him. Because that wouldn't have helped my daughter. Derek looked confused.
How?
Turning the situation into another confrontation wouldn't undo what happened. Jason paused. My job was to make sure she was safe. Derek nodded slowly. Jason continued. After that, the responsible thing was to let the proper authorities handle it. Derek looked down. I thought you'd want to punish me yourself. Jason shook his head.
No.
Why? Because I'm not interested in revenge. Derek looked up. Jason continued. I want you to understand what you did. Derek didn't answer. You frightened someone who was simply trying to walk away. Derek nodded. I know. You don't become strong by making people afraid. Derek looked at him. Then what makes someone strong? Jason answered. Being able to control yourself when you're angry. Derek remained silent. Jason added. You don't have to be afraid of me. Derek looked surprised. Jason continued. You just have to understand that your actions have consequences. That sentence stayed with Derek, because he finally understood the difference between fear and accountability. Jason wasn't trying to dominate him. He wasn't trying to humiliate him. He wasn't trying to prove that he was tougher. He was simply refusing to let anger control his choices. Derek walked away quietly. For the first time, he realized the person he had been trying to intimidate had never actually needed to intimidate him back. The bully had expected an action hero. Instead, he encountered something much harder to defeat: self-control. And the biggest mistake Derek had made wasn't grabbing Jason's daughter. It was believing that everyone around him would remain silent. This time, they didn't. The witnesses spoke. The evidence spoke. And Jason didn't need to say much at all. The truth had already spoken for him. The situation had changed completely. What began as a public confrontation had become a moment of accountability, and Derek could no longer hide behind excuses. The authorities continued handling the case through the proper process, while the witnesses' statements and available security footage provided a clearer picture of what had happened. Jason stayed close to his daughter, but he never tried to interfere with the investigation. He didn't call anyone for special treatment. He didn't ask anyone to make the consequences disappear. He simply wanted the situation handled fairly. That was something Derek hadn't expected. For someone who had built his confidence around intimidation, it was difficult to understand why Jason wasn't using his reputation or influence to control the outcome. One afternoon, Jason and his daughter sat quietly at home. The atmosphere was much calmer than it had been days earlier. She looked at him. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Were you angry when you saw me?" Jason paused. "Yes." She looked surprised. "You didn't look angry." "I was." "Then how did you stay so calm?" Jason leaned back. "Because being angry and acting recklessly are two different things." She listened carefully. "When someone hurts someone you love," Jason continued, "your first instinct may be to react." She nodded. "But your first instinct isn't always your best decision." She looked down at her hands. "I kept thinking maybe I should have done something differently." Jason immediately shook his head.
No.
She looked at him. "You tried to leave." "I know. You told him to stop." She nodded. "You did what you could to avoid making things worse." His voice softened. "Don't blame yourself for someone else's decision." Those words stayed with her. She had spent days replaying the incident in her mind, wondering if she could have avoided it. Now, for the first time, she began to understand that walking away wasn't weakness. It was strength. Meanwhile, Derek was facing a completely different reality. The people who once surrounded him were slowly distancing themselves. His closest friend finally confronted him. "You need to take responsibility." Derek looked annoyed. "I already apologize." "You apologized after everyone saw what happened." Derek sighed. "What do you want from me?" His friend answered. "I want you to stop acting like everyone else caused this." Derek remained silent. His friend continued. "You followed her." Derek looked away. "You ignored her when she told you to leave." Another pause. "And then you made everything worse afterward." Derek's expression changed. He couldn't argue with that anymore. For the first time, he wasn't surrounded by people telling him he was right. He was surrounded by people telling him the truth. And the truth was uncomfortable. A few days later, Derek encountered Jason again. This time, there was no crowd. No shouting. No security officers standing nearby. Just two men having a conversation. Derek approached cautiously. "Can I talk to you?" Jason nodded. Derek stood there for a moment, trying to find the right words. "I've been thinking about what you said." Jason waited. "You said, I don't have to be afraid of you." "I remember." Derek nodded. "I thought that was strange at first." "Why?" "Because most people would want me to be afraid." Jason shook his head. "Fear doesn't fix behavior." Derek looked at the ground. "I think I've confused fear with respect for a long time." Jason didn't respond immediately. Derek continued. "When people backed away from me, I thought that meant I was powerful." Jason said, "Sometimes people walk away because they don't want trouble." Derek nodded slowly. "I understand that now." There was another silence. Then Derek said something unexpected. "I don't know how to change." Jason looked at him. "You start by admitting what needs to change." Derek nodded. "And then you make different choices." It sounded simple, but Derek knew it wouldn't be easy. Changing a pattern built over years required more than one apology. It required consistency. It required accepting consequences without blaming others. And most importantly, it required learning to stop before anger became action. Derek looked at Jason. "Do you really think people can change?" Jason answered, "Yes." Derek seemed surprised. "Even someone like me? People change when they decide they don't want to remain the person they used to be." Derek took a breath. "I want to try." Jason nodded. "Then start with the people you hurt." Derek understood exactly what he meant. Later that evening, Derek approached Jason's daughter. He kept a respectful distance. "I know an apology doesn't fix everything." She remained quiet. "But I'm sorry." She looked at him. "You scared me." Derek lowered his head. "I know. I didn't know what you were going to do." "I understand." She took a breath. "I hope you never make someone feel like that again." Derek nodded. "I won't." There was no dramatic handshake. No instant friendship. No magical moment where everything was suddenly forgotten. Instead, there was something more realistic. Accountability. Jason watched from a distance. He knew his daughter didn't owe Derek forgiveness. He also knew Derek's future behavior was ultimately his own responsibility. As they walked away, his daughter looked at him. "You really believe he can change?" Jason nodded. "I believe people should be given the opportunity to do better." She smiled. "But they still have to prove it." Jason smiled back. "Exactly." And that was the real lesson behind everything that had happened. Strength wasn't about being the loudest person in the room. It wasn't about making others afraid. And it certainly wasn't about winning a confrontation. Real strength was having the power to respond with anger and choosing responsibility instead. Jason had shown that by protecting his daughter without losing control. Now, Derek had to decide whether he could learn the same lesson. Because the hardest battle he would ever face wasn't against Jason. It was against the version of himself that had convinced him intimidation was power. And that battle had only just begun. For Derek, the days after the incident felt completely different. The attention had faded, the crowds had moved on, and the authorities were handling the matter through the proper process. But Derek couldn't simply move on. Every time he remembered that afternoon, he remembered the moment Jason arrived. Not because Jason had threatened him, not because he had tried to overpower him, but because Jason had remained calm when Derek expected anger. That stayed in Derek's mind. For years, Derek had believed that the strongest person was the one who could make everyone else nervous. He had mistaken silence for fear. He had mistaken people stepping away for respect. Now he was beginning to understand that none of those things meant he was powerful. One evening, Derek met with his closest friend. The friend looked at him seriously. "You've been quiet lately." Derek nodded. "I'm thinking." "About what?" "Everything." His friend waited. Derek finally said, "I don't think I was the person I thought I was." His friend leaned back. "What changed?" Derek looked down. "Jason." His friend raised an eyebrow. "What did he do?" "Nothing." "Nothing?" "That's the point." Derek explained that Jason could have shouted at him, threatened him, or tried to embarrass him. Instead, he had simply allowed the truth to be documented. His friend nodded. That probably hit harder than anything else. Derek gave a small, bitter smile.
"Yeah."
For the first time, he wasn't proud of how people reacted to him. He was embarrassed by it. The following day, Derek saw Jason again. He hesitated before approaching. "Can we talk?" Jason nodded. Derek stood several feet away. "I've been thinking about what you told me." Jason waited. "You said real strength is controlling yourself." "Yes." "I used to think that was weakness." Jason remained quiet. Derek continued. "I thought if people were afraid of me, they couldn't challenge me. And now I think they were just waiting for me to leave." Jason nodded. "That realization matters." Derek took a breath. "I owe your daughter another apology." Jason answered carefully. "She can decide whether she wants to hear it." Derek nodded. "I understand." "And remember," Jason added, "an apology isn't something you use to make yourself feel better." Derek looked at him. "Then what is it?" "It's accepting responsibility without expecting anything in return." Derek absorbed those words. Later, when he saw Jason's daughter, he approached only after she acknowledged him. "I won't take much of your time," Derek said. She waited. "I was wrong." She didn't say anything. "I crossed a line, and I frightened you." Her expression remained serious. Yes, you did. I can't change what happened. No. But I can make sure it doesn't happen again. She nodded slightly. I hope you do. Derek stepped back. Thank you for listening. He walked away without expecting forgiveness. That was another lesson he had never understood before. Sometimes doing the right thing meant accepting that the other person might never trust you again. And that was okay. Over the following weeks, Derek began making small changes. He stopped getting involved in unnecessary confrontations. When someone disagreed with him, he walked away instead of escalating. When his friends tried to encourage him to act tough, he refused. Some laughed at him. Others didn't understand. But Derek didn't care as much as he once had, because he had finally learned something important. Being respected wasn't about controlling other people. It was about controlling yourself. Meanwhile, Jason never followed Derek's progress. He didn't need to. His daughter was safe. The authorities were handling the matter. And Derek's future was his own responsibility. One evening, his daughter asked him, "Do you think he really changed?" Jason thought for a moment. "I don't know." She looked surprised. "You don't. Change isn't something you prove in one conversation." He paused. "It's what you do when nobody is watching." She nodded. That answer made sense. Because anyone could apologize after getting caught. Anyone could promise to behave differently when consequences were waiting. The real test would come later. Months later. When Derek was angry. When nobody was recording. When there was no authority nearby. When he had every opportunity to return to his old behavior. That was when his decision would matter. And eventually that moment came. Derek was walking through another busy public area when he noticed an argument beginning nearby. A man was shouting at another person. People were gathering. The situation looked familiar. For a moment, Derek felt the old instinct returning. Step forward. Take control. Make people back down. Then he remembered Jason's words. You don't have to be afraid of me. You just have to understand that your actions have consequences. Derek stopped. He took a breath. Instead of joining the confrontation, he stepped away and called for security. It was a small decision. Nobody applauded. Nobody even noticed. But for Derek, it was the biggest proof yet that he was becoming someone different. For the first time, he didn't need anyone to fear him. He simply chose not to become the person he used to be. Several months had passed since the incident that had changed Derek's life. The shopping district had returned to normal. People had moved on. The authorities had completed the necessary process, and Jason's daughter had slowly put the frightening experience behind her. But Derek hadn't forgotten. If anything, he remembered it more clearly than ever. Not the confrontation itself. Not the crowd. Not even the consequences. He remembered the conversation with Jason. He remembered expecting anger and finding self-control instead. And most importantly, he remembered the lesson he had never understood before. Fear wasn't respect. Intimidation wasn't strength. And controlling other people didn't make someone powerful. Real strength began with controlling yourself. One afternoon, Derek was walking through a crowded public area when he noticed something familiar. Two strangers were arguing near a storefront. One man was becoming increasingly aggressive. His voice was getting louder. People nearby began stepping away. Derek stopped. For a brief moment, his old instincts returned. He could walk over. He could make himself the center of attention. He could intimidate the aggressive man and force everyone else to back down. That was the person Derek used to be. But then he remembered what happened months earlier. He remembered Jason standing calmly in front of him. No threats. No shouting. Just a simple message. Your actions have consequences. Derek took a slow breath. Then he stepped back. Instead of confronting the man, he alerted nearby security and explained what was happening. Security quickly arrived and separated the two people. The argument ended without becoming something worse. Nobody knew what Derek had almost done. Nobody congratulated him. Nobody even knew that he had made a different choice. But Derek knew.
And that was enough.
Later that evening, Derek happened to see Jason's daughter. He immediately stopped. She recognized him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Derek said, "I'm glad you're okay." She nodded. "Thank you." He kept his distance. I wanted you to know something. She waited. I've changed how I handle things. She looked at him carefully. What happened? Derek explained what he had done earlier that day. I saw an argument starting, he said. And instead of getting involved, I called security. She smiled slightly. That sounds like a good choice.
It was.
There was a pause. Then Derek added, I used to think walking away meant losing. She looked at him. And now? Now I think sometimes walking away means you won. She nodded. That took you a while to learn. Derek smiled.
Yeah,
it did. From a short distance away, Jason had noticed the conversation. He didn't interrupt. He simply watched. His daughter eventually walked back toward him.
Dad.
Jason looked at her. He really is different. Jason nodded. What makes you say that? He didn't ask me to forgive him. Jason smiled. That matters. She looked back at Derek. He just wanted me to know he made a different choice. Jason nodded. That may be the most honest kind of apology. They continued walking. Derek remained behind, watching them disappear into the crowd. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel the need to prove anything. He didn't need attention. He didn't need fear. He didn't need people stepping aside when he entered a room. He had finally discovered something much more valuable.
Peace.
The incident had started with someone believing that power meant making another person afraid. It ended with that same person learning that power could mean refusing to become angry. Jason had never needed to fight Derek to teach him that lesson. He simply showed him what self-control looked like when it mattered most. And Derek finally understood. The strongest person in the room isn't always the loudest. It isn't always the most intimidating. Sometimes, it's the person who has every reason to lose control and chooses not to. That was the real victory. Not revenge. Not humiliation. Not fear.
Change.
And months after that terrible afternoon, Derek had finally begun becoming the kind of person he should have been all along.